Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. When the screaming started, I was running pallets when the screaming started. On a normal night, the sub-basement under Rock Prairie Commerce Park felt like a city built by an ant colony. Long, lit corridors, painted stripes on the concrete, steady routes that led from dock to dock. We called it the Under, a honeycomb carved out of gray limestone just outside Kansas City. Old quarry tunnels widened into cavernous bays and stitched together with hydraulic freight lifts that rose to street level like quiet elevators for 53-foot trailers. I'd been on second shift for the better part of 4 years, assigned to Bay C, forklift ID 8FGCU25, propane. I liked the night because the world went quiet enough to hear the stereo whine of the mast and the clack of the chains when I tilted back a load. The air down here stayed at 60-something degrees year-round. Coffee never steamed, but the propane frost on the tank did. It has its own weather, the Under. My name is Luis Ortega. People called me Lou because it fit on the radio better and sounded like somebody who could be trusted with a compressor and a jammed dock plate. I kept my gloves tucked into my belt and a roll of caution tape hooked to the forklift cowl. I had a supervisor named Dana with a voice like a walkie squelch, sharp, always on. Our crew included Nassim, who could thread a reach truck between a trailer's rub rail and a pallet like he was sewing, and Shauna from security, who wore her radio earpiece like an earring and knew every camera's blind corner. On nights when the yard was full, we'd receive trailers into the Under by way of Lift 3 or Lift 4. A yard tractor topside would push them onto the plate. The lift sank, the doors rolled, and a trailer appeared in our world like a freight elevator had coughed up a horizon. We scanned every arrival with a tablet. Trailer number, seal number, shipper, receiver, temp, special handling. It was all by the book, bolt seals that clicked through and hasp at the rear doors, and took a set like a promise, 6 or 8 digits etched in aluminum. If a seal didn't match the bill, we called security. If a trailer smelled wrong, we called security. If anything twitched when it shouldn't, we called security. We had procedures for everything right up to and including earthquakes, which down here sound like a truck idling behind a wall forever. The manifests started getting strange the week before. Extra layers of stickers like a tree ring of authority. White label, yellow hold, red quar. Then a paper sleeve with a barcode that gave only a guide. No shipper, no contents. The seal numbers were long and sequential, military precise, and the bolt heads were stamped with a symbol I didn't recognize. Not a familiar carrier or food distributor. They smelled like nothing. Like the inside of a brand new lunchbox. We were told not to stage them near the warm side, meaning the doors where people came in and out, and to park them angled nose in behind the steel posts. Temporary, Dana said, tapping her tablet, until the state clears the backlog. She didn't meet my eyes much. When I asked backlog of what, she shrugged in a way that meant she knew and didn't want to be the person who said it out loud. The Under ran on restraint systems, dock locks that reached and grabbed the ICC bar under a trailer's tail like a metal hand. Red light outside, green light inside. You never broke that code, not if you liked your spine intact. When the screaming came, it bled through the code like a siren through closed windows. It wasn't sharp at first. It was a thin, repetitive thing that rode the machinery. I thought it was a pallet jack squealing somewhere down Bay E. I lifted, sat and turned, and then it came again, longer, and it had the shape of words. "Donna," I said on the radio, "you hearing that?" A pause, a click. "Hearing what, Lou?" "Something in C24 through C30, maybe D like a I didn't finish. You don't say screaming in the under if you want radio silence to stay uncracked. Hold position, she said. Another click as if she'd pinned her mic up high and was moving fast. I parked with the forks flat, engine at idle. Propane hissed soft. The scream came again, definitely words now, banging under the echo. A man's voice. He was shouting, then coughing, then shouting again. The words took shape as he got close to the frequency of the fluorescent ballasts. And finally, I could pick them out stencil clean. Help, please. Open. Someone. Open. Dock. C-27 blinked red outside, green inside. No one had a trailer at that door. C-28 held one of the anonymous ones, nose to the posts, bolt, seal uncracked, red quar label half under tape. We never put those on live doors. We staged them off to the side, chalked front and rear, away from the roar of the dock plates. But there it was, sitting live. The green light inside was on. Who moved that? I muttered. Nassim drifted around a cone in his reach truck, heel toe like he was dancing. He pulled up beside me and raised his face shield. You hearing that? He asked. His voice was smaller than usual. I think it's C-28, I said. He frowned at the trailer number stamped on the metal. That one came down on lift 4 2 hours ago. He tapped his wrist like he was checking a silent watch. Shauna cleared it for staging. Shauna said staging, Lou. I left my forklift in neutral with the parking brake set and walked. The bay lights hummed, the paint on the floor, green for pedestrian, yellow for crossing, looked suddenly gaudy and innocent as if it came from a playground. C-28's placard pocket was empty of the bill. The paper sleeve with the barcode was creased like someone had thumbed it in a hurry. The dock leveler's panel showed locked. The dock lock arm light was green. The exterior red lamp over the dock door was steady. The trailer's air lines were disconnected. We didn't supply air in the under. The rear doors were latched with a bolt seal, and from inside that closed, sealed box, a man shouted, "Please!" You hear requests for help down here in a dozen forms, most of them mechanical. Over travel alarms, deadman switches, the beep-beep of something in reverse. Humans rarely made it into the soundtrack. When they did, it was usually someone who'd lost a phone or the top sheet of a bill down in the pit and wanted a hand. But this was human, and it hit straight through the ribs. "Shauna," I said on the radio, "you got eyes on C-28? Her voice came back clipped and dry. "Negative. Camera 23 is down. I'm sending a roamer." "Don't send anyone." Dana overlapped. "Lou, hold for me." "Hold for what?" I asked. "There's someone in the box." "We don't open those," Donna said, words soldiering down the channel one after another. "Security has control. Do not cut the seal." My eyes had already found the bolt head. The seal was a bright cryptoid blue with a 6-digit number stamped into it. They never made the number sentimental. No 4s in some cultures, no 13S for others. This one had a pair of 3s and a 0. The metal was clean, no paint rub, no pry marks. The hasp was fat and new, like it had been installed yesterday on a trailer that had hauled dry cereal for 10 years. A voice inside the box hit a note that made my teeth feel like they were vibrating. "Please, please, it's me. I'm—" The rest dissolved into coughing. I looked down at the dock lock green. It meant the lock had the ICC bar. It meant the trailer couldn't creep or jump when a forklift went inside. It meant safe. Green meant safe. But green could mean something else if the wiring was wrong. If someone had mispatched a camera feed, if a lock had been spoofed with a jumper. I looked at the line where the trailer's edge met the dock plate. It was pretty. The world loves a pretty interface. It makes the dangerous thing seem like a design choice. "Somebody open them all," the voice said hoarsely. close enough to the doors now that the words hit clean, as if he'd put his lips against the seam. Please, it's dark. They won't. Who opened what? I asked, before I felt my thumb press the radio key. A pause. Then, the containers. I didn't remember pressing the dock light switch. I didn't remember stepping closer either. But my breath came back to me reflected off steel. My hand touched the bolt head without thinking, and the cold of it traveled up to my shoulder like a warning walking a cable. I looked down at my gloves hooked at my belt, at the box cutter in the pocket of my vest, at the yellow caution tape roll, at the way the paint had worn off the hasp just where hands always touched metal. A breath of air came through the door seam, sweet and cool and stale with desiccant. The box smelled like it hadn't been used for anything human. "Security is on the way," Dana said. "Lou, if you cut that seal, I will write you up in so many scripts they'll have to send an extra bag of toner down the lift." "I'm not cutting anything," I said. And I wasn't, at least yet. But the light's green, and the lock says locked, and nobody eats past midnight in a sealed trailer. If that's a person, they're out of air soon. "Those are quarantine," she said distinctly. "That is the Q in quar." "Quarantine of what?" Another pause that felt like philosophy. "People," she said. Nassim had stopped 3 feet behind me. Without looking, he took the roll of caution tape and looped it around a post, then around the handrail, then pulled it across like a ribbon on a gift no one should open. A habit. Make a perimeter. The tape read "Caution" in repeating typography. Beneath the words, in small letters, the brand name, Safe Step. The man inside the trailer coughed again. I listened for other voices and didn't hear any. I listened for the skid of a pallet in transit inside the box, the bounce of my footsteps coming back from the roof, any clue about volume and load. It was empty except for a person. That, more than anything, made it unreal. The under made sense because it was predictable. Wait in, wait out. Wheels. Devices that turned high risk into routine. A human inside a sealed empty space felt like a thought experiment someone forgot to end. "Shauna," I said, "when was this one staged?" 21:08 hours, she said immediately. Number ending 407. Lift 4, escort at time of arrival. Clearance level, hold please. I could hear the ruffle of paper. Clearance level orange. "Orange is," I said. "Above me," she replied, brisk and dry, like she was passing a baton someone didn't deserve. "Above Dana too, don't open it. Lou, do you copy?" "I copy." My mouth wanted to say something comforting into the seam, something like, "We're here, and there's a plan," but the under teaches you not to promise. I reached up and tapped the trailer door twice. "We hear you," I said, not using the radio, trusting the metal to carry it. "Stay back from the door, okay?" "Okay," the voice said, small. From the far end of Bay C came the whump of a fire door disconnecting from its magnet. The emergency doors in the under are held open by little squares, steel pucks that taste voltage all night. When the system thinks it's time, they let go and the door finds its own hinge. I felt it like a change in pressure. Then the PA speaker crackled overhead with a tone I had never heard. Not the evacuation bell. Not the forklift backup chorus that sometimes got into the PA by way of crosstalk. A single note, pure and sustained, like a tuning fork. "Attention," said a calm woman's recorded voice, one we'd only ever heard on test days. "A temporary health protocol is in effect. Please stay at your assigned workstation. Do not approach sealed trailers. Await instructions from security personnel." Somebody opened them all. The man inside whispered again. Not into the seam this time, but in the general tone of a nightmare repeating its thesis. A scuff on the concrete behind me made the little muscles along my spine register. I turned. A face peeked around the corner of a post. It was Alvin from sanitation, thin as a broomstick and twice as nervous. He had half a dust mask on his chin, a box of nitrile gloves under one arm, and the other hand gripping a long-handled floor squeegee like it was a pike and the under was a castle wall. His eyes were very wide. "Was that a person?" he asked. "Get back to your station," I said, only because the PA had said the same thing and it felt like less than an order if I echoed a recording. He didn't move. "Shauna told me to bring masks," he said. "Like the purple ones." He held up the box as if the color would help. The purple ones had P100 cartridges, half-face elastomer. We used them when we mixed floor finish. The lift doors at the end of the bay rolled up with a groan. A yard tractor wasn't behind them. Nothing with diesel, no topside light, and in the tractor's place was a 4-person security team in gray. It was not our usual 2 for a code yellow. They wore gray uniforms with a high-vis stripe and the kind of plastic face shields we'd all learned to tolerate during flu seasons. The front 2 had long black cases slung to the side like they might be holding tools. Shauna walked in front, hand up, palm out. Her freckles looked like someone had drawn them with a new pencil. "Back all," she said. "Back and out of the tape." She didn't look at the trailer. Her eyes were on the green dock light like a person staring at their own heart monitor in a hospital hallway. "Shauna," I said. "We got a voice. One person. They said someone opened the containers." She nodded sharply without changing where she looked. "Copy. Do not approach. Do not cut the seal. Wait for command." "What command?" Nassim asked. "The one that comes from upstairs. Because lift 4 is a long elevator ride from my patients." She didn't answer. Her radio crackled with a terse string of words that sounded like somebody reading colored chips off a paint chart. She nodded like the words were a prayer, then came closer to us and lowered her voice. "Okay," she said. "Here's what I can say without having to borrow Dana's toner. Some of the trailers are being used as isolation. We received guidance late this afternoon. We were supposed to stage and wait for a mobile team." "Isolation of what?" I asked. Her jaw tightened, not in anger, but in the way people tense when they want to do right with limited vocabulary. "People who were exposed," she said. "Symptoms, a new pathogen. You've seen the news." I had. Outbreak, they called it on the push alerts. City after city adjusting curves and jacking up ICU counts. The videos were mostly of ambulances and the occasional blurred-out fight in a waiting room. Everyone posted infographics like those could be taped over their windows to stop what blew through the vents. What none of those videos discussed was where the overflow went when hospital hallways filled. Freight is a language. It finds volume no matter what you name it. "How," I asked carefully, "did a person get into a sealed trailer?" "That is question 1, Shauna said. Question 2 is why the dock light is green. Question 3 is how many." Before she could take another step, the power hummed down like someone had pinched the throat of the under. The fluorescents stayed on. They always did, fed by a separate panel with battery backup. The cameras ticked as the pan-tilt units discovered gravity again. It wasn't a full failure, just a sag, a reminder. But when the power sags in a place held together by magnets and codes and trust in sequences, your pulse does a little thing like it's remembering your first bicycle fall. The screaming rose down Bay D like a relay. One, then another, then one further back. No words now, just a shape that had learned how to multiply. The short hairs at the base of my skull felt like radio antennae picking up stations from out of state. "Shauna," Dana said in our ears, voice level but pitched a notch louder, "confirm how many court trailers are live on C and D." Shauna's eyes flicked left, doing the mental map. 7 on C, she said. 9 on D, none on E. Any on the lifts? Negative. Lock the lifts, Dana said. Red key. Shauna turned to her team. Red key, she echoed, and one of them peeled off toward the lift control pedestal at a lope that didn't look official and therefore looked honest. The others formed a triangle in front of C-28. Cases opened and set down. Inside were not rifles, which my heart had braced for, but collapsible stanchions and a portable barricade with a swinging arm, the kind we used when we needed to make a temporary no pedestrian zone. It looked pathetically civil. Back, please, Shauna said again, even if we weren't forward. I looked at the lock light, still green. The man inside the trailer said, please, please, they're opening. And then he made a sound that wasn't a word, but the throat's answer to bad news. A clatter snapped us all leftward. Dock C-30's door shuttered with a single blow, as if someone had dropped a pallet inside. The light over that dock was red, and the lock indicator on the panel was blank. A second blow followed. At a rhythm like a small body learning how to be big, Shauna's eyes widened, then narrowed, the left-right focus of someone counting lanes. Alvin, she said, surprising me by using his name. You still got those purple masks? He jumped. Yes, he squeaked. Hand them out, she said, turning her head just enough to make sure her team didn't think she was whispering. Fit check, over your nose. We put them on with the familiar ritual. Hook, tighten, breathe in, feel the seal cinch along the bridge of the nose. The cool rubber stank like new tires. The effect was immediate. The screaming became a little more distant, and each of my breaths sounded like a radio effect looped too loud. Dana, Shauna said, we're at the doors. Advise. Donna's voice came back thinner, like if she'd moved to a room with less ceiling. Stay closed, wait for blue team. What's blue team? Nassim asked. People whose pay grade includes keycards we don't have, I said. At C-30, the blows stopped. In their place came a scraping, then a wet cough. Not gory, just the kind of cough that makes you feel like your lungs had been dipped in a bucket and shaken twice. Another voice rose and fell like someone trying to match their own breathing to a faulty metronome. Then, very plainly, in a tone devoid of drama, hello? It is very hard to keep your hands by your sides when someone says hello from the other side of a thing you're trained to open. Everything about the under says if a person says hello and there's a door between you, find a dock key in a safe procedure and open it. Lift the leveler. Verify restraint engaged. Break the seal if authorized. Swing the bar, stand clear of swing radius, communicate. Fall into a bright system that assumes commerce is the world's lifeblood, and our job is to pump it without letting it spurt. The under industrializes kindness by making the doors work the same way every time. That night, the door winked its red light at me and the system said no. Hello, the voice said again, softer. Is somebody there? If I'd been alone, I might have broken, but the under is crew work, and the crew was present, and their presence felt like harnesses. Nassim's boot heel tapped twice, a habit he had when he wanted to move but couldn't. Shauna's jaw tightened into a diamond. Alvin's eyes shone over the mask. Lou, Dana said, take your unit and slide the barricades from aisle 3 to close C-20 through C-26. We want lanes. We want separation. Tape every crosswalk, no improvising, no heroics. Copy? I could do that. The order felt like a drink of water. Specific, boring, doable. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and said, copy, like the word could keep the rest of my blood where it belonged. I returned to my forklift, released the brake, and let the engine note be an animal noise I understood. Nassim peeled off the other way, reach truck gliding for the barricade rack. Alvin followed me with a box of masks like a musician clinging to his instrument in a burning theater. I slid barrier after barrier into place, steel feet grating, the tape pulled taut across crosswalks. The paint on the floor divided the world into right and wrong halves. The tape made new halves where the old map wasn't good enough. The screaming started in Bay D again and then moved toward us as if the facility itself had a shift change between invisible generations. Quiet, loud, quiet, loud. The under is mostly limestone and concrete, and those are good at bouncing sound. Somewhere far off, the building inhaled, the ventilation system cycling as if it could smell us. We finished the lane and paused. "Lou," Shauna said in my ear, "you got any of the heavy straps on your unit?" "4," I said. 2-inch ratchet straps, yellow. Bring them to C28. I thought we weren't touching C28. "We're not," she said, and when I rounded the post, I saw what she meant. The security team had used the stanchions to create a corral with one side missing. They had also set a rolling ladder with a high handrail beside the trailer, not to reach the door, but to reach the lock arm. Shauna wanted straps to tie the ladder to the posts, so if the trailer jumped, or if anything inside hit the doors, nobody would lurch. It was the kind of safety you apply when you plan to stand near a thing, not open it. "Here," I said, and fed the straps through the ladder's side rails. Across the post, cranked them down to the strain. The ratchets sang their metallic click-click-click as the slack disappeared. The man inside spoke again, voice lower. "It's dark," he said, as if reporting the weather. "It's so dark." "What's your name?" I asked, before I could stop myself. A small silence. "Tomas," he said. "I came here in the evening. They said it was temporary. I was with a group. Then there was a bump. Then nothing. And my phone is out." "You came in a group?" Nassim asked, arriving with another strap. "How many?" "I don't know. I was afraid to look at anyone." He made a noise like a laugh worn down to a coin. "You ever feel like if you look somebody in the eyes, you'll fall over?" It was astonishing how ordinary that sounded. Fear never shows up wearing horns. It's always a coworker in a uniform you recognize. Another bang from further down T. Another exchange through a seam. Another voice, this one hoarser and too near to sobbing. Security's triangle widened. The stanchions clattered. The tape quivered where it was tied. The under felt suddenly fragile, as if the paint on the floor had been drawn with the kid's chalk. "Blue team on 2, Dana said. "Positions." The lift doors whined open at the end of the bay. I expected another set of gray uniforms, but the people who emerged were more deliberate and less visible. Blue jackets with reflective panels, white helmets with clear shields, hard cases on wheels that looked like they contained instruments instead of something you pointed. The first one nodded at Shauna. They didn't do the security thing of squaring their shoulders and becoming a wall. They did the medical thing of becoming porosity, odds and ends. A cart and its shadow. One of them had a logo on the jacket I didn't recognize, something federal by the shape of the seal. "Good evening," the lead said, which felt like a time machine had cracked open and let March through into October. "We need 3 points established, here, there, and there." He was pointing at C28, C30, and the lane between. "We do not break seals. We do not create airflow. We confirm status. We triage." "Triage without opening?" Nassim asked, incredulous. "Knock and speak," the man said. "It's not ideal, but a mostly sealed trailer is still better than a hallway no one can ventilate." "What's the pathogen?" I asked, surprising myself. I expected him to say that was above our clearance and to ask me to please return to a safe zone. Instead, he looked at me like I was part of the room. He said a long name I'd seen scroll at the bottom of a news feed and then added, "The short version. If someone is infected long enough to become very agitated or to lose cognitive boundaries, they're already broadcasting droplets and breath. We want barriers. We want time. We want patience." "Are they contagious like measles?" asked Alvin, whose knowledge of disease came from a grandmother who measured time by epidemics. His eyes shone over the mask like marbles. "Not that contagious," the man said. "But the probability of attack is not zero, especially in close, unventilated spaces." "Like trailers," I said, and he gave me a look that was not unkind. Shauna pointed at the green dock light on C-28. "This one reads locked with a green on the interior circuit. Is the exterior red lit?" "Yes." "That's a wiring fault," he said immediately. "Kill power to this door." Shauna snapped her fingers at her tech, who jogged to the panel and threw the breaker labeled for C-28's controls. The green inside light went dark. The exterior red light held. That made me feel better in a primitive way I couldn't justify. Lights told stories, and the story of a door with no interior signal was simpler than a lying door. The blue team leader rapped gently on the seam between the trailer doors with the knuckles of his gloved hand, slow as if knocking on a sick friend's apartment. "Tomas," he said. "Yes," came the reply, so fast all of us exhaled in a small gust. "My name is Dr. Reeves," the man said. "We're outside, we can hear you. We're going to ask you some questions. Are you alone in there?" An intake of breath, a stall, a restart. "Yes," Thomas said. "I think so. I heard the others." But then quiet. "Have you had a fever?" "I don't." A pause. "I felt warm. Any dizziness? Disorientation?" "It's dark," Thomas said, with such honest defeat that it put a diagonal through me. Dr. Reeves kept his voice level. "Any nausea?" "Cough?" A little cough. A shallow breath. The cough closed over the microphone of the under and stole its authority. "Any changes in your skin?" he asked gently. "Sensitivity to light, noise?" "Everything hurts," Tomas said, "like the world is too loud. Please, it's so dark." Reeves looked at the seam as if he could see through it by intention. He turned to Shauna. "We need to get him light without opening. Do you have any of the flexible borescopes for trailer inspections? The ones with the small LED you can thread through the door seal?" Shauna blinked once, grateful to be asked for a real thing. "Yes," she said. "We use them to check for shifting loads." "Get one," he said. She keyed her radio. "Maintenance, bring scope to C-28, now." I felt useful again. We had scopes and mirror poles for contraband checks, desiccant inspection, all the small nosy tasks of freight. The thought of a thread of light woven through a darkness that contained a person made my chest tight for a new reason. While we waited, the banging started at the far end of D in earnest. Someone was hitting the door with something metal. I imagined a loaded pallet jack turned into a ram by 5 scared arms. The PA tone chimed again. "Remain at your stations," the calm voice said. "Security is responding." Nassim swore under his breath in a language like water. "That voice always sounds like she's about to ask us to fill out an employee survey," he muttered. And the laugh that shook me came out of me had less to do with humor and more to do with letting steam out of a system that was not designed for heat. Maintenance arrived at a trot, scope case thumping against a thigh. Shauna snapped it open and fed the thin black cable along the seam where the strip gasket had a tiny gap by the hinge, the way we sometimes did when a shipper refused an open-door inspection. The cable slid 6 inches, then a foot. She pressed the power button. A small disk of light appeared on her tablet screen. A gray-brown smear. She adjusted the focus and found a field of ribs and bolts up close, the inside of the trailer's rear doors. She rotated the probe. The light swept over scuffed wood floor, a pair of feet in sneakers, the crumpled mountain someone makes when they're choosing the smallest part of space to be in. "Tomas," Reeves said softly. "We have a little light coming in, can you see it?" A beat. "Yes," Tomas whispered, and my hands went numb. "Hold on," Reeves said. "We're going to talk you through breathing. We need to know if you can sit upright." "I can," Tomas said, "I think." "Any injuries?" Reeves asked, slipping the question past the word he might have used in a different room. "No," Tomas said, "just tired. And my throat. It burns." "Okay, you're doing great." Reeves glanced at the gauge on Shauna's tablet because even a doctor likes instrument panels. "We can't open the doors yet, but we can get you light and then something to drink. We're going to rig a bottle on a line under the seal." "You can do that?" I asked. "Textbook contraband retrieval inverted," Shauna said dryly, and the way she said it made the under feel competent again. "We've done this at a border station. Different reasons." We threaded a thin plastic line under the bottom sweep where the door meets the plate. The gap was maybe a quarter inch. The only reason it existed was because the trailer wasn't perfectly square after a life of docks. We taped a bottle of electrolyte drink to the line and inched it under, flexing the plastic until the lip caught, then tugging gently. On the screen, we watched the small bottle nose into view like something invented. The little circle of light found Thomas's hand as it came out, palm up. He touched the light the way people touch a window to a warm room when they're cold outside. Then he slid his fingers along the floor until he found the bottle and closed around it like a person deciding not to die. I know that sounds melodramatic on a page, but in the under, it was quiet enough to hear plastic crackle and liquid move inside a bottle, and those sounds feel like plot. "Small sips," Reeves said. "Slow." The banging down. Bay D stopped. The coughs became groans. Not hurt, not hurting. Just the long, low sound bodies make when everything in them wants to resolve to zero. The blue team leader's eyes flicked that way. "We're going to need labels," he said. "Numbers on doors, names, times, if anyone escalates, if voices change, we move them to the far lift and contain the lane." "Escalate how?" I asked. "Agitation," he said. "Loss of orientation. Attempts to breach. That third one is the one that puts everyone at risk." "Breaching," Nassim said. "We have language for breaching now." He wasn't mocking. He was just teaching his mouth a new word. "Lou," Dana said. "Are you with Shauna?" "Yes," I said. "Good. You're the calmest man I have within 50 vertical feet. I need you to go to D and be the same there. Tape off everything that's not a straight line. Then come back." "Copy," I said. And when I set my forklift in motion again, the internal combustion noise steadied my hands. I drove towards D. As I passed the edge of C, a man in a high-vis jacket stumbled from the shadow between two posts. He was one of ours. Leo, from Lift 3. Black beard, gentle eyes. He wasn't wearing ear protection, which made my mind throw up a flag because Leo was a safety nerd who did. His mouth opened and closed before sound arrived. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then shook his head. His eyes slid over me as if locating me in a list. "I opened one," he said, very soft. My chest made a noise like a doorstop. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice low on purpose so words wouldn't become a wedge. He swallowed. "They were knocking. They sounded like kids." He blinked hard and his face did something I will never be able to describe without feeling like I am lying. "I popped the seal," he said. "Just to look. Just to make sure they weren't." He didn't finish that sentence because none of us wanted to put a noun at the end of it. "They were wrong," he said finally. "They didn't look at me, Lou. They looked past me. like I was a door, not a person. I heard the word wrong land like dust. Where? I asked. He lifted a hand and pointed at the dark wedge where D turned inward. I closed it, he said quickly. I slammed it, and the bolt took, I think I got it before they... He stopped again, either because he couldn't or because he was choosing not to build a memory strong enough to find him in his bed later. Okay, I said. Okay, buddy. Go to the guard office. Talk to Shauna. Say what you said to me. Don't leave anything out. You're good. You're okay. He nodded in a series of small jerks and did as he was told, feet whispering on the concrete like he was trying not to wake something. I drove down D, laid tape, swung barriers, made a straight lane out of a snake. I passed doors with red lights, doors with no lights. I passed a door that had a smear on the inside window the size of a hand, faint like someone had pressed without wanting to leave their print in the world. At D12, something hit from the inside so hard the whole dock shivered. The dock plate thumped, the springs sang, the lock arm rattled in its housing like a trapped insect. I'm not squeamish. I've been down here in the under after midnight enough times to know the noises buildings make. That noise was not a building noise. Shauna, I said, forcing my voice into the radio like an apology. D12 is agitated. Copy, she said immediately. Label and note time. Label, I said, pulling a Sharpie from my vest. I wrote D12, 2319 on a strip of gaffer tape and stuck it to the dock plate control box because there's always a box with a flat surface and space in the under. Then I took a breath and did something that felt like shaking a slot machine. I knocked on the seam with the knuckles of my glove 3 times. The banging on the inside stopped so abruptly the echo tripped on its own shoes. Hello, I said. This is Luis. I'm right here. Can you tell me your name? The silence did a long, slow roll. Then a voice spoke in a tone that had forgotten about dialogue. We need out. We can't open the doors, I said. We need to keep everything safe for a little while. Can you breathe okay? Another pause. Then sharp, it's hot. Do you have a bottle of water inside? Any? I didn't get to the end of the sentence before the banging restarted harder. Okay, I said, held my hands up like the door could see them. Okay. I backed away carefully, every step measured against a set of procedures that had always ended with a slot in a form saying, load secure and doors sealed. The trailer hit the doors hard enough that the normal flex of sheet metal turned into a cartoon wobble. The lock arm squealed. The exterior red lamp wobbled on its bracket. I looked up at the numbers stenciled under the lintel, painted years ago and touched up like a beloved signpost, and thought, for the first time, about the existence of numbers when their purpose gets eaten. Lou, Dana said. Back to sea. I went. Tomas had finished his drink. The scope showed his hand resting on the floor again. He was whispering something to himself. And it was the kind of sound a person makes when they're learning the rhythm of an environment they hate. Reeves nodded at me like we were co-workers in a very slow shop. He had labeled C28, 2257 on the box with the scope feed, and below it a neat line. Alone, oriented, requests light, took fluids. The way doctors turn people into notes sometimes bothers me, but that night it made him a hydraulic lift, a thing that can move heavy problems. Here's what happens next, he said calmly, as if we were sitting around a folding table noodling a plan over cold pizza. We keep them in place as long as we can. We move the worst to the far lift separate lane. We label, we don't fill the air with panic, we keep the power steady, we talk. All night? Nassim asked. As long as it takes, Reeves said. And I realized suddenly that the man had a tone that made time shorter. Maybe that was in the training. Maybe you learn how to remove the teeth from a thing by naming it with all the vowels. The under took a breath again. The PA stayed silent, which felt like a gift. In the spaces between our tasks, the sounds became a map. Footsteps, tape peeling, ratchets clacking, metal tapping, voices practicing the word okay like a prayer. The infected, or exposed, or escalated, or whatever we were allowed to call them, banged, then didn't, then whispered, then fell silent, and with each shift I felt the stone overhead differently. Heavy, held, old. Shauna stepped up beside me and touched my sleeve. "I need to ask you something," she said, sounding younger than she had since I'd known her. "If one of those locks fails, if one of those doors pops, can you put your unit in the gap without losing your fingers?" "Yes," I said, because it is not the night to teach somebody how to be timid. "But that's not a plan." "I know," she said, "but it might be a moment." "Okay," I said, "a moment I can give." "And if a moment turns into a door?" she asked. "I'll back out," I said gently, "and we'll tape that lane and make a new map." She nodded, and for a second her eyes did a thing like gratitude was a friend you were inventing. "Thank you," she said, then turned and was security again. We worked. We learned new words for old tasks, triage instead of tally, quarantine instead of hold, symptom instead of shortage. We wrote names on doors with tape like sailors painting prayers on hulls. We fed bottles through gaps. We knocked. Some answered with names. Some said hello in tones that were too smooth to resolve the day's shape. One sang under her breath and then apologized for singing as if noise were an offense. Reeves spoke to each, wrote the same beautiful clinical gasoline on his tablet, and moved to the next. At 1:10, D12's lock arm failed. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a clang and a scream and a cut to credits. There was a pop like someone had plucked a ruler off the edge of a table. The arm snapped back to neutral, and the door flexed an inch at the latch. I was already moving. The forklift knew me well enough that the mast lifted before I had the lever fully back. The forks slid into the little pocket between dock plate and bumper like a letter in a slot. I tilted up. The lower edge of the door met steel and stayed there. The whole dock shuddered like a bell rung gently. Behind the door, a body, two bodies, hit 3 times in a beat like someone had learned how to be percussion and wanted to practice. The claws of the dock lock skittered and then found nothing because they had nothing to find, and the exterior red light bounced on its screw and then held. "Lou," Dana said. "I have D12, I said. "Forks pinned, not a complete seal." "Copy," said 3 voices at once, and I loved them all for being too far from me to help and trying anyway. Nassim skidded to a stop on my right, dropped a wheel chock under my front tire because that's what you do to keep a forklift from creeping under load, even when the load is a door, and we weren't supposed to be doing this at all. "Do not open," Shauna said, voice iron. "Maintain pressure, blue team en route." I kept the forks where they were, not lifting, not lowering, just being there. And the weird thing about steel is that sometimes that's exactly what it wants, to be a space thing that refuses to move. Behind the door, something bumped twice more and then stopped, and in the small pause I heard breathing through metal, the kind that has forgotten rhythm. If there were words, they had lost their vowels. "Hold," Reeves said, arriving at a careful jog with 2 people and a roll of plastic. They taped a clear sheet over the gap so if anything sprayed, it hit transparency first. And my brain cataloged that fact as sane, filed under the same heading as label C28 at 2257. He leaned in, not too close, and spoke through the seam. "My name is Reeves," he said. "You're doing okay. We're going to keep the door closed." He didn't ask if they could hear him. He didn't ask if they wanted to go home. Those are questions for later, when the air can handle them. We stood like that, a machine and a man tied into an equation, while the under took stock of itself. Somewhere, another lock was trying to be green. Somewhere, another voice was learning to shape the shape of a hallway in words. I watched the hands on the dock clock move. The big hand tripping in a gritty way because the person who spritzed it with air once every month had not done it recently. I thought of my apartment topside, water stains on the ceiling like continents. I thought of my cousin, nearest hospital, the text that said, "We're okay, we're okay." I thought of how a day has a weight when you don't want tomorrow. The under taught me a lot about weight. It taught me that weight is only dangerous when it's moving. At 2:40, we had 15 doors, labeled, 11 with names. 4 fought. 2 sang. 1 prayed. A trailer in Bay B, which we hadn't counted, registered a single tap every 10 minutes like a heartbeat. The yard above us stayed strangely quiet, as if the tractors were crouched down listening. The PA did not speak again. The fluorescents held. The scope gave Thomas a square inch of moon. At 3:03, Leo came back from the guard office with a face that had decided what kind of day it wanted to be. He stood beside my unit at D12 and put his hand on the paint the way religious people touch statues. "I'm sorry," he said. I thought I was helping. "You were," I said, "for you." "That isn't the same," he said. And he was right. At 4:10, drift came over the under like weather. The banging stopped. The coughs became smaller. Breathing became something the building did as a hobby. We strapped the rolling ladder to one more post and fed one more bottle through one more gap. The air tasted like hand sanitizer and propane and limestone. We had not solved anything. We had, however, kept things from becoming something else. There's a kind of victory in that. The under does not give you medals. It gives you the feeling of having put a hand against a thing and held it in place long enough for a better idea to arrive through a lift door. Sometimes that's the entire job description. Just before shift end, when the corners of the world get soft, when the line between night and morning turns into a slow zipper, Reeves tapped the seam at C28 and said, almost conversationally, "Thomas, how are you?" A long pause. Then, "The light helped," Thomas said. I thought I was fallen, and then I wasn't. "We'll keep it there," Reeves said. "When we can open the door, we'll open the door. Not yet, but we will." "When?" Thomas asked, because of course he did. "When the air is right," Reeves said. And I decided I was going to remember that phrase and use it in places it did not belong, because it made something calm in me. I killed my forklift, set the brake, and let the engine tick down to silence. The tapes we had pulled across the floor made new lanes we would have to explain to the morning crew. The dock lights told stories with their colors, and for once we were listening with our whole body. The under hummed, the way old quarry stone hums when it has been asked to hold more than pallets. Somebody had opened them all, the man had said. Maybe they had. Maybe more would come down on lift 4 with barcodes that contained only GUIDs and tapes that said Quayar. Maybe tomorrow we would be asked to step back another 20 feet and to learn new procedures that made old ones look like toys. Or maybe the world would taper instead of explode. I am not a prophet. I am just a person who knows the sound a dock plate makes when it climbs to meet a trailer that promises not to move. I stood beside the door at D12 and listened to the breathing on the other side, resolved to something gentler than panic and harsher than sleep. I touched the bolt, head on C28 like it was a talisman, and then moved my hand away, the way you learn to stop touching a bruise. Above us, morning started moving through a city that carried more than it should. Down here, we wrote names on doors, and told somebody in the dark there was a little light and then a little more. We did not break the seals. We waited for the air to be right. And while we waited, we built a map we could live with for one more hour, then another after that. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.